The shortest way to define creative writing is defining it as the art of making something up. But in order to elaborate this definition, we have to talk about other aspects. First of all, the world that a writer creates in his work is neither the real world nor a fantasy world. We can define it as fantasy world only if it differs from what we commonly and objectively call reality. We can define it as a real world only if we mean that reality is a combination of a million individual personalities. As Vladimir Nabokov explained, a writer is a fabler and a teacher, but he becomes a great writer when he can be a charmer. The magic takes place when the reader is in a state of mind that does not make him wonder if what he is reading is a fact or fiction. Magic does not lie in the structure of a story, it lies in its style, and style is not a method or a choice of words. It is much more than this. It is a part and an innate characteristic of the writer's personality that makes his work inimitable. Creative writing's teaching began in the USA in a prestigious workshop called Your Writing Workshop, born in 1946, which was attended by great writers such as Flannery O'Connor, Philip Roth, and John Cheever. Creative writing's teaching in Italy began in the 80s of the 20th century, thanks to the opening of the first schools in Milan, Rome, and Florence. There are various forms of creative writing, and for each of them I chose to analyze a specific artist. First of all, I'm going to talk about poetry. In 1967, Pierpaolo Pasolini interviewed Ezra Pound, one of the most controversial personalities of the 20th century. On one hand, Pound believed that for poetry to be new and revolutionary, it had to be comprehensive. Poetry is also history, politics, economy. Poetry is also international justice against usury. But even if he was committed in society, he lived in the ivory tower of the genius, who does not adapt to a dominating belief, and who has a bomb hidden within himself. And the genius becomes a genius when he frees that bomb on common sense. I could only think about Sarah Kane to talk about drama. Sarah always raised opposing reactions due to the scenes of masturbation, fellatio, rape, defecation, and even cannibalism in her works. However, no one ever understood that Sarah Kane did not write about anger, but about love, the desire to love, the will of love, the wait for love, the disappointment of love, the uselessness of love. Her talent consists in her ability to describe the light and the abysses of the individual and of love, forcing the audience to open its eyes that would prefer to remain closed. But art is not only the expression of beauty, it is the expression of beauty of truth. Sarah Kane stresses violence on stage, but this violence could never be defined obscene because it is extremely heartbreaking and human. Hermann Hesse is one of my favorite novelists. He suffered from depression and attempted suicide, but since the revolver was jumped, we were able to witness his majesty. One of his greatest works is the novel Steppenwolf, whose protagonist struggles with the duality of his soul and hates its entirety because it is an unbearable plurality. Even if the story talks about a desperate agony, it is not about tragedy. It is mostly a story that talks about healing. We can only heal life's scars through humor. To be happy, a man must learn not to take himself too seriously, and to accept to come to terms with the world that surrounds him. Moreover, the individual must be aware of his soul's fragmentation, because if he does not appreciate the beauty of his complexity, he will never manage to fully live. A short story usually talks about the most important part of a character's life, or at least about a parenthesis in which the character is afflicted by an existential epiphany, and it is composed of 3 acts. In the third one, we found out if the story is a tragedy or a comedy. In both cases, it is fundamental that the protagonist has changed. One of the first short stories I read was by Edgar Queré, the creator of a new literary genre who manages to talk about the very delicate themes through a harsh and humorous style. His talent lies in the irony and in his way of sharing the joy of life with his reader, even though it is extremely difficult to find something good in a world of wars and devastating pain. I chose the song The Sound of Silence, written and sung by Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel, to talk about creative writing in music. Most people are familiar with the song thanks to the movie The Graduate, but this song remains fixed in one's mind, especially for its words. Through some details, such as the cobblestones and the turned color, we feel the dreariness of this dark, cold and empty street, where a ghost man does not have enough voice nor strength to catch the attention of other people, who are blind in the face of obviousness and are victims of a silence that separates them, even if they seem near. The metaphor of the seed that is planted in the narrator's head gives the song an even more poetic connotation, which reaches the peak when the same seed, instead of becoming a blooming flower, becomes a cancer that branches out. It means that the lack of communication is the most serious illness of society. Also in screenwriting, the artist that stands out is the one who has an archetypical story which brings a universal human experience to life, and who manages to tell this story with a peculiar narrative style. For instance, Almodovar's writing choices were a scandal because of homosexuals, transsexuals, and drug addicts that were the protagonists of his movies, who embody any other person of society that has to go through tragicomic events every day. Almodovar manages to create a subject who is apparently peculiar, to describe his sensitivity and stratify him with common feelings and reactions. This shows that writing is a world where each human can use his voice.